Hello, everyone, and welcome to Church Matters, where we talk about matters of the church and how the church matters in the world. My name is Brian Gross. I'm a priest at Christ Episcopal Church in Cedar Rapids, and I'm joined by Charles Crawley, a member of Christ Church.
Hello, everyone.
So, Charles, you've known our guest today for some time now. I wonder if you would introduce him.
Yes, I'd be glad to. I've known Jonathan through St. Paul's United Methodist Church here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and through other organizations like Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, Nourished, and of course the ICE gatherings, which we'll get to later. And Jonathan is the lead pastor at the St. Paul's United Methodist Church here in Cedar Rapids.
That's great. Great to have you with us today, Jonathan. Hey, I wonder if you could just open up by maybe telling us a little bit about how you got into ministry and maybe what your sense of call was or is.
I'll begin by saying thank you for having me. It's quite an honor to be with you. I have a lot of respect for this congregation and for you, Charles, and for you, Pastor, as well. My story, sense of call, I had no intentions of being in ministry, didn't want to be in ministry. I grew up in an Assembly of God church, and that very much shaped my life. And I thought that somehow that would shape my place in the world, but I didn't want to be a pastor. And a few situations, both theologically as well as some interpersonal challenges, led me to think I should be an academic, because then I can think about the life of the church, but I don't have to deal with the mess of all of it. And so I went to seminary at Duke, and I saw that my professors, who were some of the biggest names in the church/academy, didn't have such fancy lives. I mean, they were sitting in more committee meetings than I thought pastors did, and so some of the shine and the sheen of that work wore off. Probably in reality, though, it was more coming to terms that if I was going to be honest and authentic with my faith, that I did need to live in the world of that faith rather than on the fringes of it, thinking about it. And that is no smear to any academics who do that in good faith. But for me, I needed to be in the church. I also needed a faith that was more embodied, that had some intellectual rigor to match the place of the Spirit's work, which I was deeply appreciative of and tried to be sensitive to. And so I ended up in a United Methodist Church setting, thought they were both and kind of people, and thought that there could be some space for all of that. And so I still was not entirely sure about ministry, but didn't know what else to do. And the academy was no longer a viable option for me. And so I ended up continuing on the ordination path and coming back to Iowa and serving three very small churches in two very small towns in southwest Iowa, one open country church, and started to fall in love with the people that I served and the role of ordering worship and being with people in the highest of highs in their lives and the most challenging of lows in their lives as well. And so I was warming to the life of church ministry, but I think my sense of vocation became much clearer in the middle of the pandemic. I was here in Cedar Rapids, the associate pastor at St. Paul's, and through a circuitous series of events, I ended up, this was after George Floyd had been murdered, and there was a response in our community and across the country, of course. But I started to get involved with some folks who were leading the protests, and somehow I don't know exactly how to explain all the details of this, but I got connected with community organizers in the Gamaliel network. And so in the middle of the pandemic, sitting in my study at home on Zoom for about 10 hours a day for 7.5 days, I thought, this is how I want to be a pastor. And that's sort of will lead into some other parts in the
Well, I think
conversation.
it does lead into nicely the listening campaign that you've been involved in your church. Could you tell us a little bit about what that's involved?
Yeah, so 2020, we went through this training, and a key piece, the most fundamental basic tool of community organizing is one-to-one conversation. To understand where someone's deepest sense of self-interest comes from and to build relationships around shared self-interests. And so I stayed connected with Gamaliel folks, some of the national leadership team, some of the regional leadership team, and they introduced me to a practice or a program they called Rekindling Our Congregations, ROC. So in 2022, we trained 13 listeners at St. Paul's, and we had 116 one-to-one conversations. So in a congregation that has a long and rich history in the community, also has a lot of interests and a lot of cares, I couldn't tell you what we cared about, except for to say, well, I think everything. I think we care a little bit about it all. And what we found when we collected the responses from these one-to-ones, and we had a small team that did a little bit of data analysis, a little bit of prayer, a little bit of discernment, we found 4 very clear areas of focus for us. And as I was still the associate pastor, knowing that our lead pastor was nearing retirement, we preached a series of sermons on those 4 areas of focus, and we heard a resounding yes back from the congregation. This is who we are. This is what we care about. This is what we want to do. And because we'd had a lot of one-to-ones with people, we knew some new leaders. We had identified some new leaders who could step up and take some new responsibility for that work. And so that's where it started. And then I've continued to stay connected with Gamaliel folks, but they came into or were awarded a large Lilly grant to do larger listening campaigns with congregations that were part of their affiliate organizations. And we are not an affiliate in Cedar Rapids, but I'd been staying close enough to them, and we were starting to see some momentum developing here in town. And so they said, we'd like to try this out in Cedar Rapids as well. And so we've been pulling congregations together. There are about 9 of us that are working and doing similar to what we did in 2022. Had some congregations who said, we really like the idea, but where we are in some strategic planning, and it doesn't make sense for us right now. But we have completed the process of doing one-to-ones, the first stage of it at least, and we're moving to a discernment stage. And most congregations did between 30 to 50 one-to-ones among their people with a clear sense of, we're moving towards a clearer sense of who we are and what we really care about. And I think that's just a life-giving kind of thing for me.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it was pretty successful within your church itself, and then getting other churches involved as well. Yeah. So getting that community organization going there. Was there a something that cropped up for you with that, being able to get the community organized? Was there a certain thing you wanted or sought after for getting others involved, other churches?
So one of the things, and this is maybe at a very basic general level, but it really drives me, and a lot of this was through the week-long training, I gained some clarity. I desperately want churches to know that they have agency to do the things that they care about in the world. I'm not even sure that I care what the thing is that they care about, as long as there is a sense that we are people with a mission, and by God's grace, we can do the stuff that God has called us to do. And so much of this has been about kind of clarifying the ethos and the interests of congregations And hopefully those align in some good ways. But if they don't, but a congregation says, I really think we can make good on our calling in this city, that wakes me up in the morning. That drives me in the day. I, of course, want that for St. Paul's, but I want that for every faith community in our city and beyond. But
sure. So as part of this organizing and community organizing, I suppose it feels like out of that perhaps has come some involvement with immigration rights in Cedar Rapids. So how did that evolve? How did that come up?
A lot of the same paths that emerged with getting connected with Gamaliel. So David Goodner, who's the executive director of Escucha Mi Voz in Iowa City, he had introduced me to organizing. He was my sponsor for the first week-long training I went to. And the night after I finished all those hours on Zoom, and it was still in the pandemic, I put my mask on and went to Iowa City, and they had this very powerful gathering where essential workers who were undocumented had community, city council leaders, and about 200 people who said, you need to commit some ARPA funds to supporting us. You know, most of us were getting checks in the mail, but they were not.
And what are ARPA funds?
The, what is it, American Recovery Plan? I'm not sure what the last day is, but funds in the Biden administration that were to support federal grants. Yeah. And they ended up winning a couple $1 million that went to undocumented folks in Johnson County. And so that was a clear, and we met in one of the Catholic parishes in town. And so it was faith communities, people of faith who were showing up and saying, we have something that we're demanding, and they got it. And so because of that, I've stayed closely connected with David and the work that Escucha Mi Voz is doing. We also have a lot of connections to immigrants from the African continent at St. Paul's. We have an African national pastor and about 120 African national members. You may know Mugisha Glare, who has United We March Forward. He worships with us, and we do a lot of good work together. And so there was a natural sort of progression into working in support and in solidarity with immigrant folks in town. And then I think the other piece of it, you know, for the last 9 months or so, immigrants have been the scapegoat. And if there's anyone who's vulnerable and who has to live with a never-ending sense of looking over their shoulder, not sure who's profiling them or what risk there is, that seemed like a place where people of faith really needed to step up. And so it was all those pieces together that led to doing a lot of that work out in front of the Homeland Security Investigations Office.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that, because I've been to those gatherings. They're very powerful. And I've been amazed at the variety of church and other religious organizations have been leading in that, and you've been one of the key leaders in that. So what has that been like for you when you're with a group like that? Because it's not a ready-made church. It's quite diverse.
It is very much so, and there's a kind of palpable tension across the board between folks who are with us and have different ideas of what that should look like, and of course the tension of standing in front of a place where many of the times we've been out there, there have been ICE officers with masks on and in tactical gear, as if we were, you know, a major threat of some sort. It's been incredibly frustrating and incredibly inspiring, all at the same point. And oftentimes it's been a police tape line that has been the dividing line. The folks who are on the outside of that police tape line who are showing up, many times for people they haven't met, but they just know they need to do something. Our faith calls us to something. or even people who are not people of faith. Our sense of goodwill and the common good calls us to do something. And so we show up. And I think there's also this beautiful sense when people go into that building, and it's a scary thing. I mean, you don't know what door you're coming out of, if you're coming back out to go live your life, or if you're going to be taken out of a back door in a paddy wagon and shipped out of here. To see people go in and, put their hands together in gratitude, or to have a stressed but smile of appreciation to the folks who are gathered there. But really, the moment of joy is when someone comes out of that front door and 200 to 300 people, depending on the day, are cheering for them and saying, "Welcome, welcome. We're so glad you're here." And to see, small children or parents or individuals coming out, and they can't help but smile. And sometimes, particularly if they have a relationship with the Escucha Mi Voz, they'll report back and say, I don't have to check in for another year, and to hear the joy in those moments. And then the frustration of it is that this place exists, and that they're now putting a fence up in front of it as if we are some sort of threat to them. I think that sends profound messages of the militarization of our city, as well as the threat that we are. And it sends a not so subtle message that the people who have to be on the other side of that fence to even walk into that building, as if they're already imprisoned, or if they're criminals of some sort. And that hurts deep. I mean, that's not who I would hope that we would be as a people. And so it's been intense, intense joy and intense anger. I've been kind of at the middle of the conversations with the city about where that fence could go and the right-of-way space. And for the first time, something that I thought would never happen, email communications I sent are now on the development services page of the city's website, which is a weird place to have my email communications. But it's been good work, and we, even this last week, had about 50 of us that went to a city council meeting, and 11 spoke. And I didn't get a final tally, but I know there were some of those people who had never spoken in those spaces before. And so when I think back to that point of people finding their voice, stepping up, saying, my voice matters in the public square. And when we're talking about the things that shape our lives, I need to have a voice in them. Those things just fire me up. I get really excited about that.
Well, and I know that with things that are going on in our society and our community, there are a lot of folks who are feeling maybe a little helpless, not sure what they can do. And this is certainly one place to get involved. There are many places to get involved right now.
There are no shortage of opportunities these days.
That seems like one. And so in doing this, then you've, you're out of the church, and now it seems you've had to really become involved in the political arena as well. And I wonder, within your church and within other churches, when folks say, well, churches need to not be political.
I've heard that before.
I'm sure you have. I think I've been to your church, and there's a sign about that on the wall. How do you answer that? What do you answer then?
First, it has to start with, what do we mean by political? Oftentimes, I think there's a sense of partisanship. We often think of that, or my perception is that we often think of that as you're either speaking as a Republican or speaking as a Democrat. And I agree, there isn't a lot of place for that in the church. Even though the administration has come out saying, well, the Johnson Amendment doesn't really mean we can't do that, I think the church, to be faithful in its witness, does need to be nonpartisan. However, if we think about politics in the deeper meaning of that word, of the way that we order our lives together, then I don't know how the church can not be a part of those conversations. When we're talking about love of neighbor, and the policies that get played out at the local, state, and national levels, those have incredible bearing upon our neighbors. We've got conversations right now about health care in the wake of government shutdown, and SNAP benefits, and what public education is going to look like. And these are all things that shape not only the sense of the common good and what kind of world we want for the generations to come, but also our deepest command to love draws us right into those conversations. And I really believe that if we are faithful in answering those questions, there are moments where it will look like we're aligned with one party more than another. And there are times where it will look like we're aligned with another party. And there are times that will look like we're just out in left field, not in agreement with any of them. But I know at St. Paul's, because of the way that we've been pushing a bit more, this is one of the things that's been coming out of the one-to-ones, even in a cursory reading of the responses, is this is a conversation that we need to have. And I'm really excited to have it, because I'm hoping that we will together, not just in a series of sermons sort of telling people how it is, but having those conversations together, that we'll have a better understanding of what politics means and what people of faith are called to in the world. And so I absolutely believe that we have to be involved in the world. And I call that politics. And others may not, but that's where I come from.
So when you ask people to get involved in politics, or whatever you want to call it, in our community, what should people expect when they do that?
Can you say a bit more?
Well, when you go to an ice gathering, what should people expect when they go to something like that?
Well, I imagine, like me, you should expect to be inspired by the power of the people, putting our voices together. There is strength, and there's a palpable energy to that. If someone hasn't done this before, I imagine there's probably a little bit of anxiety, maybe a little increased level of blood pressure. I hope in those spaces that people will tap into some of their anger. If we recognize that the world is not the way we want it to be, anger isn't something that we should shy away from, but it can be the fuel to clarify our vision of the world as we desire it to be. And so it can be a whole slew of emotions. This last week when we were at the outside of the Homeland Security Investigations Office, we learned from someone who had been there before our accompaniment began that somebody had gone in at 8 a.m. and they didn't come out. Everybody else was coming out in about 20 minutes, but it was about 9:30, 9:45, and they were still inside. And the crowd started to get a little uneasy. Was this a family that was going to be detained? Were they going to be deported? And somewhere within the crowd, someone started saying, "Let her go, let her go." And it started to build energy. And for about 20 minutes, we said nothing else but let her go, let her go, let her go. And you got to believe that when she and her teenage son walked out of that front door, that there was a deep, deep sense of joy on her face, on her son's face, on our faces. And I think there are not many places in the world where something that pure and that real and true can shine through. So I think you experience a lot of things in those places. Some of them good, some of them frustrating, and some of them good because they are frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine a lot of folks going to an event like that, not knowing what to expect. There's a little trepidation, and what they need to do, what they're getting themselves into, or not. And
there's some of that. The thing that I've started to hear from people, and I really appreciate this, is people who say, I see the courage of others and it begets courage. And I came and I was very nervous. I was very, very skittish. And then I saw others stepping up and asserting themselves in these spaces. And now these are the folks who come and they're saying to others, why aren't you there with me? Which is great. I mean, that's another level of courage too, to say that to people they love and care for.
Sure, and I would suspect that even if it's not courage to do this particular thing with folks' immigration sense, courage to stand up for something else that maybe does make them angry.
That's right.
That, hey, I see you all doing this, and that's important. It's not really making me as angry, or I don't feel it, but this other thing is, and maybe that gives me the courage to go do those other things as well. That's right. Like we've said, the menu is large as far as what we can stand up for.
That's the truth.
And we are taught as Christians that what we feel is right and wrong, although that varies amongst people. But the love and loving neighbors and loving each other, a lot of things fits into that, and how to take care of each other. I would ask what you've done this, and you've been out there in the world. You're still meeting on Sundays as well. So, what are there other things you're hoping to achieve as a pastor there?
Yeah. So St. Paul's has a pretty long and rich history. They've stuck their neck out on the line. Some key moments. I think about the decision to sell the land to Dr. Harris, and in essence breaching the red line in town, and really tried to embrace that as not just who we have been, but that as the guide of who we are still to be. And so I really desperately want this congregation to find its voice and in its place of courage. Sometimes I probably stick my neck out a little further than some people are happy with, but we can reel it in if we need to. But starting there, I am deeply convinced of the power and the importance of building power as people of faith. And so my dream and my hope is to build a faith-based community organization in town that would have a full-time organizer who can help, because yes, there is still ministry that has to happen on Sundays, and there are funerals that need to happen, and there's pastoral care and sermons that need to be written, and this work still needs to go on as well, and people of faith need to have someone who believes in us as collective people of faith, and not just Christians, but interfaith movements where we show up for the things that we agree on and that we know that we really care about. So that's my dream. That's what gets me up in the morning. That's what I am working toward. That's this listening cohort that we're working on. And the next step is to draw more congregations and more folks into it, to that end of creating a powerful organization in Cedar Rapids that pursues the common good.
Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for what you're doing and inspiring the rest of us. We really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate this time, and I know this is the first episode, and it is a huge honor to be here with you. Like I said, I have a world of respect for this congregation and for the ministry you all are doing, and so it's good to be in it with you.
All right. Well, I appreciate you being here. And Charles, well, great to have you with us also, as always. And just want to thank everybody for listening in today and listening on Church Matters.